Hi, my name's James, and I thought for this video I'd just do a few comments about all the fuss that's been occurring at the minute about alignment and race in D&D. Just to set my credentials, I've been a gamer since 1980, started playing originally with Tunnels and Trolls, and also started then Dungeons and Dragons probably about 6 months a year later when I picked up the basic D&D set, the red book for those who remember that. I've written a few supplements you can get on DriveThruRPG for Twilight 2000, and I'm actually on the playtesters list for that, for the amount of feedback I gave. So this is my perspective, it's a personal perspective, and I don't necessarily expect you to agree with me. And I don't mind there being constructive comment. That's what this should be about. We should be being constructive. So there has been a big fuss. Now what has happened is they've decided to remove a lot of the stereotyping and encourage novel NPCs. That's the statement that they've given out to say what they've done with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, if I'm honest, good players will probably do this anyway. I'm going to be very logical about this, and I'm going to concentrate on the core products, which is the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and so on. That's the level I'm concentrating on. Now, I do think that good GMs will actually encourage this anyway. At the end of the day, most of us want to make our characters unique. There wants to be something special about them. They're not a run-of-the-day stereotype. Although it has hit the point now almost where every drow PC must be good. Yeah, that's actually hit the point now. It's almost subverted the stereotype to a point where they're no longer unique. So yeah, there is that bit of an issue there. Now, they also stated that the removal of personality traits will encourage unique creatures. I think that's true to a degree, but I'm going to put a flip side in. While it's doing that, how do we know they're different if we don't have the stereotype for them to rebel against? If the drow are retconned as just elves who live underground, Drizzt loses so much of his flavour text, for example. I'm not a big fan of his, but he's probably the ideal example. In fact, he's a rebel is what marks him out. So we get the situation, having a half-orc who has completely rejected the rage side of his background and has become a scholar. Now that would be quite a nice PC. But without that background, how do we know that that's what makes him so different? So that's something just to consider. They are intended very much as a shorthand, the personality traits, to give an idea as to what the culture is like. And some of the best encounters are the ones where they are different. I fully get that. I think the issue has come about very simply by the fact that more and more settings are coming out for D&D. While it was just the Forgotten Realms, the information on the drow was perfect. But as other cultures and other settings come in, some of the background won't quite fit. So I understand trying to pull that out. And I suppose if you're then going to put that information into the setting guides, I think you're going to be okay with that. I mean, we are talking probably 2.5, 3 years before the next edition of D&D. That's going to be a lot of material come out in that before then. And is it going to match up? That's where the problems are going to start coming in. Now, I do get people saying that some of the cultures are stereotyped and reflect views going back. I mean, let's be honest, the game came out in the 1970s. If you look at the racial views there, using racial here to mean human race, it could be problematical. The interesting side effect, though, is I actually did a bit of research online. I went through how different people see different cultures from D&D and what they would base their characters on. And other than dwarves, there wasn't a lot of agreement. Even halflings had a debate where somebody regarded them as French, which struck me as really strange considering their background. But the dwarves are probably the exception, but the others, they could be almost anything. You can interpret them in different ways. I'm often struck by the fact that people regard the orcs as African. I've never seen that. Tolkien himself, if you actually look at, because he's the one who basically comes up with the orc as a creature, if you look at the orc that he has, is more based on the Mongols. So that doesn't quite fit. I can see people thinking, yeah, I find this offensive, and that's fine. We're a culture where we're going to all see things differently. We're not one culture anymore. We're sort of a mix of cultures. And if you're unhappy with something, the simple answer is change it. There are things in some games that I don't like and I've changed. So, that bit of tolerance, but nothing overt. And I personally can't say anything overt. Perhaps you can. And if that's the case, please educate me in the comments. I have no problems with comments as long as they are constructive. So I did sort of sit and think about it. And it struck me that if we just look at human culture, how many variations are there? Orcs are going to have different cultures, just in the same way. So there is a little bit of a need, but I think we also need those crutches to support us as new gamers to actually understand what we're looking at. Now, I think the biggest issue we have when we play the races is we play them as humans with pointy ears or hairy feet or whatever. We don't play them as truly that race. So I did a bit of thinking, and I thought probably the most stereotyped one is the dwarf. Now, I remember the Hordes of the Things wargaming rules that said basically think of hairy Scottish barbarians, and that is often how they're played. A lot of that is down to Games Workshop and Peter Jackson's portrayal of dwarves. Okay, things change. If you went back to when I started role-playing, the main image of a dwarf, you'd probably be pulling more off, I hate to say it, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and traditional fantasy. So each culture's perception is changed by the popular culture of the time. So we know what they're like. Although I do find it interesting that you rarely see dwarves with Scottish names. They tend to be Germanic. Just a little oddity. So I tried to think of a few things that might make a dwarven setting or a dwarven character unique, and I came up with a couple of things that perhaps would just be nice little touches. One more as an encounter. The PCs can be sat in a tavern and a dwarf walks in and without any warning kills somebody. He's never met them before in his life, and once he's killed them, he sits down and waits to be arrested. And it turns out when he's interrogated, or the PCs may even do this, that he's actually fulfilling a grudge that was inflicted on his clan by this person's clan many years before. The person murdered may not even know about it. So that's a nice little cultural one. As a PC, perhaps you're off, you get to the dibs on the treasure, and the dwarf picks up the completely non-magical ring, which has got beautiful carving, instead of a magic sword or a magic weapon, one perhaps more appropriate for a dwarf. Why does he do that? Because of the craftsmanship of the ring. So it's getting that cultural feel again. And a nice little touch as a role-playing one for a PC, you keep accidentally referring to a character as their grandparent, because that was the one you made friends with, and oh yes, they died, didn't they? And then their child died, and yes, oh yes, you're the grandchild. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. Just a nice little touch. So those are a few rambling thoughts on where we need to perhaps go with the background and race and alignment. It's a personal view. I don't expect you to agree with it, but all I would ask is we have some tolerance. There's a lot of debate going on, a lot of throwing things around, and actually read what's originally been said. I think that's probably quite a useful thing to do. Whether you agree with it or not is fine. And let's be honest, role-playing is all about understanding other people, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. If we can't do that, should we be gaming?